So in chapter 6 of the novel, we're first sort of introduced to the presence of the comfort women as sort of sexual slaves for the Japanese Imperial Army. And as it turns out, this is the first dead body that Hada sees while he's serving the army. So on page 106, 107, Jiro, so Doc Hada, and his friends Fujimori and Enchi, they're all sort of anticipating their visit or visiting the comfort women before they are being sent away. And one of the girls has committed suicide, so she's jumped from upper story floor of the building, and she's died, so she's fallen to her death. And as medical officers, Hada, or Jiro, as he's known in his younger days, sort of view the body and are instructed to sort of take care of this young girl's in her death. And they treat the girl as if she was, almost like a piece of meat, wrapping her up in burlap. There's no sort of formal funeral or rites given at her death. So you could sort of see how there is the military system also functions in a kind of misogynistic way, using and exploiting women as sexual labor. So the image there is of the Major Irota, who was there when the girl leapt to her death, and he's the one who orders Hada and Fujimori to dispose of the body. This is on page 108. He was ordering Fujimori, and I helped him carry the body inside. The major motioned for us to go back to the back of the house, the duty officer leading us to a cramped room behind the kitchens. We laid her out on a butcher's table, and he ordered us to wrap her in burlap. We would do so and then report to the duty officer, and the body was ready. The girl was the first dead person I had ever seen. She was neither homely nor pretty. She was just a girl, otherwise unremarkable, perhaps 15 or so. I kept thinking she looked to be Korean with her broad, square face. So the girl is very young, and it's evident that she's Korean. At least Hada recognizes her as such. And this was common for the comfort women, girls and women, to be Korean. I think according to one report, approximately or over 50% of the women who served as comfort women came from Korea. But they came, these women were sort of kidnapped, forced into slavery to serve as sexual slavery for the military, the Japanese military. And these women were taken from Korea, from China, the Philippines, Thailand, Vietnam, Burma, Malaysia, Taiwan, Indonesia. So all of these occupied countries that Japan had occupied and were part of their conquest, their sort of takeover, and these other Asian nations were not treated with sort of any sense of equality. They were deemed inferior, and the women were treated as objects. These girls and women were forced into sexual slavery, and according to sort of statistics, approximately 3/4 of these comfort women died. So they did not survive their experience, often, along with sort of forced sexual services. They were beaten, um, they suffered from venereal diseases, they were sort of forced to take drugs like opium. They died, they were tortured, beaten, raped, and, sometimes forced to have sex with, up to 35 men per day. So there were medical officers who were devoted just to sort of making sure these women were able to perform their duties as sort of sexual slaves for the other soldiers. And it was very sort of, the most dehumanizing, objectifying, horrifying thing that, is part of the legacy of World War II and the Pacific War specifically. And, the fact that Hada is a Korean man, and then he notices that this young woman is also Korean, sort of places him in an awkward position where he recognizes, this would be one of his, a fellow country man of his homeland. And he actually recognizes that when one of the girls tries to run away. So this is on page 111, and this is Hada reflecting back, and he says, "Why I was going to the new girls then I couldn't exactly say. I was naturally disturbed by the earlier events, but the fact that I would be concerned in particular about them, even think an iota about their circumstance, confused and irked me. I kept imagining the three of them, one to a room, the light unchastely left on. At the head of the west wing it was strangely quiet. English-style houses were, if monstrous, at least sturdily built. One of the doors suddenly opened and a girl ran out crying. She was naked, and there was a faint smudge of blood staining the inside of her legs. She tried to run past me, but I automatically caught her, not knowing what else to do. 'Please,' she said, her eyes frantic. 'Let me go. Please, let me go.' 'There's no place to go,' I said, unthinking. 'You must stay in the house.' She looked surprised at my words, staring at me as if I were someone she knew. 'Please,' she said, crying even harder now, 'I beg you.' And then she said, 'I beg you, Opa, let me go.' And then Opa is the word that the girl uses to address Hada, and this is a Korean word that would be used to address an older brother or older male, a term of respect. So Hada's actions in this scene are sort of, they indicate his sense of, duty and conformity to the patriarchal military system, right? Instead of allowing that young girl to run away crying, he catches her by the arm and holds her there and tells her that, there's nowhere to go. So we sort of see how he becomes sort of complicit in this system of sexual exploitation, even though he sort of, I think he feels, sympathy towards the young, or the girls who are forced into this circumstance. He says he was confused and it irked him, that he even took a second thought to consider their experience. He still is sort of complicit. His sense of duty is, to the armed forces, to serve the Japanese military system, and the fact that he even feels any measure of empathy for these young girls who are forced into these circumstances, it just irks him, right? It annoys him, but he still doesn't do anything in order to alleviate their pain or help them in any way. So we sort of see how Hada is in a position of both sort of being complicit to this misogynistic system that abuses these young women, but he also, I think, identifies in some way with them, right? Like the soldiers, they're sort of caught up, forced to sort of be part of this military system, and he's Korean like they are, so there's a bit of identification in terms of his ethnicity and where he comes from. And it is, a very horrifying reality that this actually took place in not just this war, but in other wars as well, where women were forced into prostitution or slavery. It's not even prostitution; it's sexual slavery. And we'll listen to or I'll post a link to an interview with one of the female survivors who had this experience of being a comfort woman during World War II. So many of the women died, so it says approximately 3/4 died. Those that survived often, suffered from, post-traumatic stress disorder, and many were left completely infertile, so unable to have children after their experience there. So it's very, a stain on history that this kind of exploitation even went on. In the novel, they'll describe the comfort stations that were set up. So these were almost like little stalls, very sort of minimal, just a mattress on the ground, maybe a light overhead, very small quarters where the women were forced to spend their time, and then they would be visited. Lineups of men, they would have to, 3 or 4 women would have to service an entire camp of men, and it was sort of based on your position in the military when you were able to visit the comfort women. So they were sort of treated, dehumanized, and almost treated like they were animals in these stalls. They become sort of, dehumanized and objectified in this circumstance. And, it wasn't just women of, over 16 or over 18. It was, girls as young as 12, 11, 12, 13. Some of them hadn't even, begun menstruating yet. And then they were taken away from their families and kidnapped in some cases, or lied to, right? Many were sort of tricked and promised, education opportunities or work opportunities where they could support their families, or they were just, taken right off, right from their homes, or off the streets, and then forced to serve as sexual slavery for the military services. And I think it is part of the sort of the masculinity that existed at this time, the sort of military masculinity in Japan, and that army sort of promoted this idea of that the men needed these women as a way to sort of boost their morale, and just the severity of the warrior mentality sort of made these men particularly sort of brutal, or trained them to be brutal. And the comfort women were seen as a way to sort of prevent the spread of venereal disease, and to prevent the mass rapes that were going on. So in places like, there's the famous, or not famous, but infamous rape of Nanking, where, hundreds of thousands of people were abused and raped by military men. So the comfort women were sort of seen as a way of sort of preventing these widespread mass rapes during military service.